So, I have all your books next to me. I have all of them. You can see them. And I'm also going to put links to your website and to your books below the video so that people can read your books. I was curious if before we start talking about Eldest Daughter, if you could talk about how you started writing poems and why you started writing poetry and how your books started coming about, because I think there's a big difference between just writing poems or writing and then starting to produce whole books.
Well, there's a step in the middle that's also a big step, which is starting to get published in the first place.
Yeah.
You write a poem, then you let somebody read it, then once you get comfortable enough, you might read it in public, then you maybe send it somewhere to a little journal and they might publish it, and only then are you thinking about putting a book together, and those are all huge steps.
Yeah. For sure.
And hard to bring off. I don't mean to make it sound like you write a poem and then it goes click, click, click.
Yeah, so could you talk about your own kind of journey through that?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in a house that was, you could almost say it was a house made of words. My mother was from Mississippi. She was from the Mississippi Delta. And she could talk so beautifully, and she could tell such a well-rounded, funny story, because what you learn to do as part of your exquisite table manners is to entertain everyone by telling a story. So everyone tells, they make this conversation by telling stories. And they're usually, many of them, family stories or stories about something that happened to you, and they have very little brush with the truth. My uncles used to tell stories, and you couldn't tell it was the same event, but they had made two great stories out of it. So anyway, she was like that, and she also loved she loved the sound of her voice, which was a very nice voice, I have to admit. And there is a very elegant old Southern accent. I don't have it, but she had this very elegant speech, and it's gone. I don't know. I don't think there's anybody that talks that way anymore, but she liked to hear herself talk. And so she would read poems. I mean, she read me Coleridge before I can remember, and she liked to read anything and I like to listen to anything. Then my father was a minister, so he studied all week and stood up and said what he'd written down. And there are a lot of contemporary poets who are, Sandy McPherson told me this years ago, who are the daughters or sons of rabbis or ministers or people like that. And she says, I think it's because they had a magic book in the house. Great.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So here is the Bible. And, it's regarded there as a magic book. Even more if it's a rabbi, because even the alphabet is sacred, And so that sort of gives you an idea that words are magic, and actually I still think that.
Totally. Very magical.
I'm sure, yeah. Magic.
So Eldest Daughter was, you said came about, over 30 years. Is that right?
Yeah. And the poems in it, actually, what you asked me about how the books came about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Will explain Eldest Daughter too. I wrote and wrote and wrote. There was a period of about 12 years when I was astonishingly prolific. It was a long time ago. It was in the 80s or so, and into the 90s. I just wrote piles of poems. Mm-hmm. And I was doing readings after I'd written a good bit. I was doing readings, and then I was sending things around a little bit, but mainly I was just crunch reading and writing, and my head was just buzz this whole time, and I would think, and I had probably 200 poems. That's a lot of poems. 200 pages in piles.
Oh yeah.
And more or less finished, and I wanted to put them in a chapbook. Chapbook's a tiny little book, which is an important first step for beginning poets. I always tell them that. They'll say, "How do I get a book?" I'll say, "Make a little chapbook first, and really work on that." And a beginning poet, I think, as I was, you can think in terms of 20 or 22, 4 pages. It takes a long time before you can think in terms of 60 or 65 pages.
Totally.
And it's really important to me to make the manuscript cohesive and read like it's in the order it is on purpose, etc. So here I am with all these piles of poems and not knowing what to do, and all of a sudden in them I found 20 poems that were alike. One of the things about my writing is it sounds like it's done by about 11 people. One poem will be by this one. One poem will be by number 9. One poem will be by number 3. The language is different. The diction, the syntax, whatever that is, the line breaks, everything. And yet they are finished poems, and I really like them. And I think, often when you're studying poetry writing, people would say you have to find your voice. I think that's a crock. To tell somebody they have one voice, ridiculous, One way when you're at a basketball game, you talk a completely different way when you talk to your grandmother. You talk a totally different way if you're in church. It is everything about it. Your sentences are longer or shorter. Your vowels are different. I promise they are. And so anyway, I think it's important to write out the whole personality, and some parts talk. Some parts you would rather not talk.